I'll press the record button. There we go. So welcome to James Sands, who's one of the co-founders of Christian Business Leaders. He's speaking today about burnout in the Bible, which is just so relevant in view of all the stresses which some business leaders have at the moment, trying to manage lack of turnover, furloughs, redundancies, and the like. James, we will be recording this session, so you will be live on Channel 4, so please do not swear. Okay, over to you.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you, Alan. I shall try and share my screen.
I better just, there you go. You can share your screen now.
Brilliant. Okay. Right. Hopefully everyone can see that.
Yes.
So my talk today is on burnout in the Bible. And a quick bit of background about me, very relevant actually in terms of how we started the meeting this morning with Alan talking about CBL and what we like about CBL. I had a very traumatic redundancy back in 2002. It seems a long time ago now. But as a result of that, really through support of Christians praying for me and also acting as mentors, I managed to start my own business in 2003 and had incredible blessings right at the beginning, phenomenal blessings. I now mentor finance directors to come across into and build sustainable portfolio careers. And I look back on my early days and think, my goodness, just how blessed was I to have that client at that time. It was just incredible. I felt I started coming back to faith. I drifted away from faith very, very much. Came back to faith as a result of all of that, and started to go into New Wine. We were worshipping when we could at St Aldate's in Oxford. And in 2006, I felt prompted by the Lord to start CBL, or to at least think about getting Christians together and Christians in business together and talk about faith and how that should impact our decisions. So 2006, we started CBL and also started accountability groups at the same time, or support groups. And that was great. So yeah, just a little bit of background about me. Burnout in the Bible. So God created man. God created man to work originally in the Garden of Eden, and He gave him great creative powers. He enabled. He asked Adam to name all the animals, just like this hummingbird, rather overactive hummingbird. And I've often felt like this hummingbird, very, very busy, but not going very far, particularly when not sleeping at night. So, first of all, we are made for work, and if we remember back in Genesis, before the fall, the Lord took man and put him into the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. So we were actually created to do work in the Garden of Eden. And it's really important to remember that, because that so much of work can feel like hard work. But we were created to have pleasurable work. But we were also made to rest. Just as God rested on the seventh day after He created the world, as in Genesis 2 verse 2, so he ordained a day of rest. It's obviously in the Ten Commandments, but that cycle of having a rest time each week, I think is really important. Again, as independents, as business owners, we can often feel tempted to work through the weekend to hit a deadline or something. But no, God is actually calling us to take that break, to make that rest. So why does work so often feel like this? How did it all go so wrong? So that's a quote from Genesis 3. And of course, it's all to do with the fall when Eve and Adam basically thought they knew better than God's commands. So they were commanded not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But I think all of our hearts tend towards not wanting to follow God, and we naturally go into rebellion. And God is a just God, and He punished Adam. He punished all of us. And one of the ways He punished us was through painful toil, producing thorns and thistles. And by the sweat of the brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you are taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. Genesis 3. But is that all that the Bible has to say about work? Well, before we get on to that, I'd just like to do a very quick poll. And thanks to Val for this, because she introduced me to the ideas of polls. Very helpful. And the poll question is, when working from home, do you tend towards one of two things? So I'm looking for you to indicate in the chat box, just to put in a 1 or a 2. And so 1 would be when you work at home, you tend towards getting distracted, or secondly, you tend towards working all hours and failing to stop. So I'll give you a couple of moments to do that. I can't see the poll, so Alan, you'll have to keep score for me and tell me how it's going. And where the weighting is going. Is it are we looking at everyone getting distracted or everyone working all hours?
Right, about 1/3 are saying 1, 1/3 are saying 2, and
Okay.
the other third are saying 1 and 2.
Oh, right. Both. Very good. Very good. Okay. So that's roughly the same as the last time I did this talk. About two-thirds basically have a problem with working all hours. I think just failing to stop, and that's certainly my issue. If the work's there and I'm here and the laptop's open, I will just do it. So my wife has to drag me away sometimes and call me to supper or whatever. So, what else does the Bible have to say about work? So the first burnout I really want to talk about is in fact about Elijah. And so if you remember in 1 Kings, Elijah had an amazing success at Mount Carmel. The context was the king at the time, a guy called King Ahab, was following Baal, a foreign god. And Elijah had decreed a drought, 3 years worth of drought. Imagine that for an economy that was dependent on agriculture. So it must have been brought to its knees, worse than a pandemic, I would suggest. And Elijah then challenged the prophets of Baal to the world's first bake-off. He challenged them, had 2 sacrifices all laid out. One which he challenged the Baal prophets to wake up their god and to burn up the sacrifice. So he watched with amusement as these prophets started cajoling their god, in inverted commas, to burn up this sacrifice. But nothing was happening, so he was goading them by saying, come on, is your God asleep? Is he in the bathroom? You know, what's going on? But absolutely nothing. And they, despite them slashing themselves and doing all sorts of things, absolutely zippo. The sacrifice wasn't burnt up. Elijah then rebuilt the altar with 12 stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel. He then dug a huge ditch around the altar, filled it full of water, and then he called on God to show that he was God and that he was supreme and he had the authority. And God sent fire and he burnt up the bull completely and all the water around the trench and everything. It was a really truly impressive sacrifice which demonstrated God's sovereignty over Baal and anything else that we would like to put up against him. as a result of that, Elijah then ordered that all the Baal prophets be killed, and they were killed. And but as a result of that, there was a wicked queen around, Jezebel, who was Ahab's wife. She threatened Elijah with death, and as a result of the burnout, that this really resulted in Elijah's burnout when he fled from Jezebel. And he came to this verse here in 1 Kings. Wait, so he does have this amazing success, a really, really high point. And then he says, I've had enough, Lord. He said, take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors, in 1 Kings 19. Just incredible. He got to the end of his tether. But the Lord had huge mercy on him. He supplied Elijah with bread and water. He then advised Elijah to stock up on provisions because he was going on a 40 days and 40 nights expedition to Sinai, where he achieved rest. He had a lot of rest there, just like a holiday. The Lord had given him bread and food and water. And there Elijah sought the Lord, and the Lord said he would appear to Elijah when he was on the mountain. So he hid in a cleft in the mountain, and then we have the famous verse where the Lord sent all sorts of weather phenomena, wind, earthquake, fire. But actually, God actually spoke to Elijah in a quiet whisper right at the end. So that was the slide behind on the slides there. So that was the picture of how far he travelled. So that was the first burnout. The second burnout, and the first burnout really, I think the lesson there is the need for rest and recuperation, and even holiday times as being a time when we can recharge our batteries, but also reconnect with the Lord through our choice of books that we read, what we're actually doing on holiday, how we spend that time. We love almost having a retreat as a holiday. It's a great refreshing time. The second burnout involves Moses. I wonder if you remember about Moses, and in particular Jethro's advice. So Jethro was Moses' father-in-law, and Moses had got the Ten Commandments, and he was busy, very, very busy, judging everybody in Israel, all the Israelites. And as there were a lot of them, he was exceptionally busy. The queues were stretching all the way around Sinai, and that was a disaster. Moses' father-in-law Jethro replied to Moses at one stage, "What you're doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone." And so Jethro's advice was basically to delegate, to select capable men from all people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. So that's in Exodus 18. So a great example as to how to delegate work, and I think as a result of that, the lower cases were being dealt with by these officials, and then it was only the tricky cases that reached up to Moses, and they were referred up to. It's almost the gestation of the judicial system that we perhaps have today. And then the third burnout. So the second burnout, I think the message on that is to delegate work wherever we can, and delegation is ordained in the Bible through this example with Jethro and Moses. And then the third burnout I'd like to put, sorry, let's just skip this. I would cite would be the early church. And if you remember the context in the Acts, early part of Acts, Peter had done a most amazing sermon to this great crowd Jews that were from all different parts. And as a result of that sermon, 3,000 people became believers at that point, a huge number. And we read in Acts that it was about, I think it was only a couple of weeks later that had risen to 5,000 believers, huge growth. And as a result of that, they were getting a lot of pressures, sort of administrative pressures. And I think in the particular, the Hellenistic Jews were complaining that the Hebrewic Jews were being treated better, in particularly their widows. So they were looking after their widows, but the complaint was that the Jewish widows were being treated better than the Greek widows, and these sort of disputes were then percolating up to the apostles, to Peter and the apostles. So in Acts 6, the early church decided, brothers and sisters, choose 7 men from among you who are known to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will turn this responsibility over to them, and we'll give our attention to prayer and ministry of the word. So delegating tasks that were important, but finding good people to take those on. So another real great example as to how to avoid burnout through delegation. And in terms of good delegation, I was indebted actually very soon after I stepped out into business on my own. I was very indebted to a guy called Bob Hayward, who has got a business called Be More Effective, and he runs a course on time management. And when I was preparing these slides, I said to Bob, it'd be great if I could borrow some of your slides on this. And he very kindly lent those to me. And I think in terms of delegation, it's really important to categorize what we're doing on these 2 axes. So you've got the important or not important, to categorize information that way, or jobs to do that way, or urgent and non-urgent. And so you've got this box, that red box there, the sort of crisis issues, which are really important and really urgent. Yeah. And then you've got the non-urgent, the little mauve box, urgent but not important, and then the yellow box. And in terms of that, great thing to do, if you can categorize all your tasks according to this grid, then when you get to an important and urgent issue, it's just to do it. You just got to crack on and do it. But if you get to find something that's important but not urgent, these are the things that often you just never get around to doing. You know they're important, but they're just drifting. So we advise business owners around how to prepare for their own exit, and how to think through the sale of their business or transfer of their business, and that's typically might be put off. But a great thing to do is to diarize it, to prioritize it that way, and to treat it and to bring it, plan for it at the right time. The grey box, basically, so you've got, it's urgent but it's not important. The great thing to do there is to delegate it, the job, if you possibly can. So in our case, our example would be a set of management accounts, doing a set of management accounts is urgent, but it's not important at finance director level, virtual finance director level. So we would delegate that either internally to a financial controller, or we have our own virtual financial controllers who will also do that level. So really think about delegating in the case of urgent but not important. And then the final non-urgent, non-important, you just got to delete it or dump it. I can find myself you going on to LinkedIn and having a look at some of the posts, and you suddenly look at your watch and 20 minutes has gone by, and you think, my goodness, that's a complete waste. Probably been quite interesting, and they caught your attention, but complete waste of time, really. So why do we work to excess? Is it to do with fear? wanting to get more, or is it that some of our work is just fruitless? In terms of fear, yeah, I think we can fear around striving for income. So that might be striving for income for survival, but it also can be a sort of relentless pursuit for wanting to earn more and more. In terms of my experience, I do need to ask where my security really lies. But I do reflect on situations where God has answered prayer, and they've been amazing. At one moment I would cite would be in January 2017. I had 5 clients at that time, and that had fallen to 2. And actually, it was in a support group on the 14th of March in 2017 that I specifically asked for prayer, because I was getting a bit desperate at that stage. And that very next day, after that prayer, a prospect who I hadn't spoken to for a year and a half contacted me and wanted to go ahead immediately. God answers our prayers. It was just incredible. And then more recently, back in April this year, 22nd of April to be precise, I'd had the idea of actually starting to support equity fundraising. So my thought was that with the pandemic, we would unfortunately, very sadly, have businesses going to the wall, but also a lot of businesses might be being started and need equity fundraising. So I had this idea, and on the 22nd of April, I woke up. It was about 4 in the morning, I think it was, and I prayed to the Lord. It's a bit Gideon-like, I suppose, to say, test my hypothesis. Lord, could you give me a dream or a vision just to confirm this is right? And so I prayed, went back to sleep, absolutely nothing for the remaining couple of hours of the night. But the next day, one of my associates, Will, actually, Val might have met him. He was doing some prospecting. So he was a virtual financial controller, so completely different level. And he was doing some prospecting in the Oxford area. And he made contact with a managing director, who said, and his pitch to him was all around, can I help you automate your accounts, make your accounts more efficient and effective? And this guy said, thank you very much, but yeah, really not interested in that. But what I really do need is I need to raise 4 million quid of venture capital funding. Will immediately got on to me, and God had answered my prayer the very next day after that prayer. It's just extraordinary. The actual prospect in the end didn't come to anything, but in terms of confirmation of the route, it was very, very good. So I think the other thing I'd say about this is that I think the Lord's Prayer is a great reminder on this. So when we pray the Lord's Prayer, we ask Him to give us our daily bread. So 2 things about that. It's daily bread. So this really reminds us back of the time when the Israelites were in the wilderness, and the Lord provided manna on a daily basis. If anybody collected more of this manna, this sort of bread-like stuff, than a 1 day's worth, it would go off. So they couldn't actually hold it, and it couldn't store it up and stockpile it. So it's daily bread. And the other thing is that it's bread. It's not caviar or smoked salmon or anything like that. It's actually bread. It's a basic necessity. It's a need. It's not a want. So what's the alternative? I think seeking His will. God is all-knowing and all-seeing, so He knows where we are. He knows exactly where we are. He knows what we're thinking, and yeah, it's very, very humbling to really be aware of that and to be conscious of that. But He does give us unbelievable peace, and I think I would quote the passage in Matthew. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon, in all his splendor, was dressed like one of those. If this is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? What shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Matthew 6:25. So I think, yeah, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. That's the Hebrews quote there. So how does it all end? Well, first of all, I got challenged a while ago when somebody asked me what my biblical worldview was. And I sort of talked through my biblical worldview, and I completely skipped the judgment. And I thought, my goodness, I need to include this. Before we talk about the second creation, really, we need to think through judgment. And so a reminder there is Revelation 20, that we will all be judged. And we will all, I certainly have done lots of bad things and wrong things and would be judged and am not worthy to go into heaven, and worthy for hell. But for God's salvation plan and God's incredible plan with Jesus being God, but then made into a man, born as a man, and coming to take our punishment on his shoulders through the cross, and then his resurrection 3 days later. Just you could not make up that story. God had such an incredible plan. And then after that, we get to the new heaven and the new earth through Revelation 21. So, in summary, Jesus said, in terms of burnouts, Jesus said, come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. There's another lovely verse that I like, and if I'm lying awake at night, I will often think it and hopefully remember it, which is a Philippians 4:6-7, which is, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And that has, just taking issues to the Lord, even if it's in the middle of the night, and then to give those over to him, and suddenly he can give peace that nothing else can give. No sleeping tablet, no anything. Just incredible. So that's all I've got to say. I've got some questions. So Alan, with your permission, I'll put up the questions. Is that all right? Alan?
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, I've
Yep.
just unmuted myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the questions I've got, does your workplace feel like Eden or beasts of burden? And secondly, how much is enough? And thirdly, how and when should we rest? So I don't know, would you put us into breakout rooms, Alan?
I will, yeah.
I haven't put that into the chat, but certainly can do.
I'm just doing it now.
I'll stop sharing.
I'll stop recording as well.